This is The Law Show on CL 650. Now back to the show.
Beep, 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 yeah.
Welcome back to The Law Show here on CIL 650. Joe Murphy, QC, and Bill Dick are lawyers with MurphyBattista in Vancouver and Kelowna. We're talking about, walking you through an ICBC injury claim. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the right lawyers to how to select a good lawyer, good questions to ask, sort of the thinking behind the way ICBC does things. But now let's cut to the chase and let's get to the where the rubber meets the road, Mr. Murphy, and talk about what happens when an injury claim takes place. You said ICBC's on it right from day one. As soon as they're alerted that you're going to file a claim, they're working on it.
Yes. And Sterling, ICBC has two roles when some motorist is hurt. This classic rear-end accident. They insure the person injured for medical expenses and rehab expenses and some wage replacement benefits.
Right. So
they become that person's insurance company. But more importantly, they insure, usually, almost always, the person who ran into them. And ICBC, logically, is more concerned with the cost of paying the injury claim than they are with the cost of paying for some physio and medications and a bit of wage benefits.
Right.
So there's a classic conflict there. ICBC's your insurer, but they're not. And the person has to be careful because the decisions ICBC makes are, like any other insurance company, based on how they can minimize their costs paid out on a claim.
Right.
So often the adjuster will try and say to the person, I'm here to help you.
Right.
And in a sense they are, but in a stronger, greater sense, they're there not to help them, but to minimize the amount paid out.
So, Bill, how do we navigate this sort of almost, it's not a conflict of interest, but there's a conflicting dynamic going on here, and all we want to do is get some satisfaction. There are some basic Murphy-Battista rules when it comes to what you should and should not sign by way of releases when approaching ICBC when this paperwork gets going, right?
Right, and you know that assumes that the person hasn't come to Murphy-Battista first.
Right. Do they usually? Do they usually seek out a lawyer first, or do we react like typical motorists and go down to a claims center somewhere?
Usually that's the normal case is they engage ICBC first,
Yeah.
They go into the office, and then they're asked to sign a bunch of papers, including, for example, an authorization for all of your medical history.
Right.
Some of which may be relevant, some of which may be completely irrelevant, but you're signing over all of your personal information medically, and you're signing all these authorizations. And one of the first things that we do when we get a claim is we revoke that, because ICBC has no right, I think, to look into your personal information that's not relevant.
And yet the person, the agent, and you're right, I think most of us, our typical reaction, no matter how serious the injury, not being familiar with lawyers or the insurance business, we would go to a claim center and sit opposite someone and try and at least get a sense of what they want. And, of course, the first thing they're going to do is ask you to sign here, here, and here. And if you don't, they sort of turn up their nose at you and give you an expression like, what's the problem? And all of a sudden you're hostile, you're not cooperative, and because you don't want to sign permission for them to do whatever they want in your life. Right. So square that circle for us, because immediately you're seen as the enemy.
It can create problems. For example, you have a mandatory obligation to provide a statement. And that's you have to give a statement about what happened.
Okay.
If you're an ICBC insured.
If you're
a driver of a car or owner of the car.
Yeah.
And you have to give it to ICBC, or is an accident report to a police officer on the scene good enough?
No, you actually have to give it. Sometimes it's over the phone, sometimes it's in writing. But if you're a driver or an owner,
you got to file.
And you are involved in a crash, you have to provide a written or an oral statement about what happened.
Gotcha.
And sometimes people, for example, will give that statement when they're brain injured, or they're on medication, or and they're not quite sure what to say.
Or just severely rattled. You know, I mean, if you've been in a car with someone who's in the hospital and may not make it, or may make it, but under very altered circumstances, your life has just changed to the point where you can't think clearly for 5 minutes. And you're sitting across the desk from someone who wants you to sign here and then sign here, and then on the back of that page, just initial there. Well, okay, you just want to get this over with. So that's a mistake then, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it can be. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to sign an authorization to provide all my medical information when I don't need to.
Right.
You do have to provide a statement, but my view is always I would think that you would want to be very careful in terms of what it is that you are writing or saying.
So what happens, Joe, after you filed the statement, and what does ICBC do next, or what do you do next?
Well, then the process is if you've got a car that needs to be fixed, it gets fixed.
Of course, right.
Liability will determine who pays the deductible. But really, that's when that's the beginning of the recovery rehab process. And ICBC, as your medical insurer, that's wearing that hat, is required to pay for some of the rehab expenses, some of the physio, some of the massage, medications, maybe an ambulance bill. But the problem is sometimes that gives ICBC the control over what the treatment is. For example, I've had clients who've been told, well, we only allow 12 physio visits. So sort of blindly, that's our policy. I had one client who was absolutely outraged. He was in a terrible accident. He was in hospital for 5 weeks because he was so badly hurt.
Right.
He gets out of hospital, and within a few weeks, his doctor said, we're going to give you some massage now. And he was told by the adjuster, and this is before he hired me, oh, we only pay for massage up to 6 weeks. You're out of luck. And this guy just went crazy with that.
Right.
Because he was working so hard to get better, and he thought, you're standing in my way. So the reality is ICBC cannot and should not control the treatment rehab process because their goal is different than what the person's goal is. They want to get all better. ICBC would like to see them get better because it reduces the value of the claim. But I think among many adjusters, they don't want to see too much treatment being given because it would tend to suggest on the other claim that this is a bad or worse injury.
So even though you don't particularly want to see ICBC have much control, if any at all, over the rehabilitation and recovery process, that's not going to prevent them from trying at all, is it?
Oh, exactly. And you get the adjuster saying, well, here's all you can do, and physio, massage, that kind of thing.
Okay. So, Bill, as we move forward with the claim, we've got the paperwork has now completely been filed. You've given your statement. The person in the hospital can't give the statement. Can a family representative file that statement? If you're injured to the point where you're hospitalized, you can't file an accident statement, can you?
No, not at that time. The idea would be at some later time, if you're able to. But there may be circumstances where you're just too catastrophically injured to do that, and then no one makes a statement because they can't.
We'll take a break in a couple of seconds, and we'll talk about how it unfolds. But when, Joe, does the decision get made, this person has been really severely injured? Not only there might be a surgical procedure required to address immediate issues, but clearly there are going to be some long-term implications here. When does that recovery and rehabilitation program get designed and begin to get implemented?
I think, Sterling, each case is different and unique, and that evolves over time based upon how a person does. And you can get some people who initially appear to be okay, not badly hurt. They may go on to have a herniated disc, which can be terrible in terms of pain, devastating, and also require surgery. You get people with the most common soft tissue injuries to the neck and back.
Right.
When you have a soft tissue injury like that, you favor the sore area, and as a result, you develop aches and pains in other areas.
On the other side, yes.
So that's sort of a moving target, but they're all unique. And the key is over time, you evolve into a treatment and rehab program because you want to see this person maximize their recovery.
Right. Okay, we'll take a quick break here, and we'll carry on. We'll find out more. We'll find out how this ends with Joe Murphy and Bill Dick from MurphyBattista in Vancouver at 650 West Georgia and online at MurphyBattista.com. Back after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.